So I am so excited to welcome Dr. Kristy Belton to Kokoro. Thank you for being here today.
Of course.
So the way we always begin this segment is with some food that matches the theme of what we're talking about. And since we're talking about imagination, my spotty internet research told me that eggs, because they have vitamin B and choline in them, that apparently it helps with neurotransmitters and with memory and all that. I don't know if that actually does anything for imagination, but I thought, hey, let's give it a try. This is my wife's recipe that she does, and it tends to be super tasty. So anyways, let's give it a try, and then we'll dive into imagination. Does that sound good?
Sounds excellent.
All right. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
I can't take any credit for how good it is, because really it is my wife's thing. So Kristy, tell me a little bit about your background, what you used to do, and what you do now.
So I used to be an academic. I used to teach at university, international studies and human rights courses. Then I transitioned out of that, ended up working for a nonprofit that put on conferences globally.
Didn't you work with the UN at one point?
So I had a short stint at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. That was, I think, 2008. But when I left academia and then left the NGO world, it was for this, basically connecting people back to the sacred within through practices outside. So I ended up getting my forest therapy certification, my yoga certification, and my creativity coaching certification. It's like I'm collecting these things, but I created what's called Prairie Pathways. It's all about bringing people back to their inner nature through these practices in outer nature. And one of the practices I really love, other than guiding people outdoors through forest therapy and yoga, is writing wild.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I think this is a really interesting program that you run. So explain what wild means, because it's not, I think somebody might hear wild and just say, oh, I'm writing everywhere, right? It's an acronym. So tell us what it means and how doing this practice may be different than other types of creative writing.
Okay, so writing wild means writing with wonder, intuition, love, and daring. Writing wild is about starting with beginner's mind, saying, you know what, all these things that I've been taught, I will put them aside for now, and I'm going to begin with wonder. Begin asking questions, get curious, allow yourself to be filled with awe about the world around you. But intuition is more of, I would say, the heart aspect, which comes from the love within that writing wild acronym, the love part. Can you love yourself and your message and what you're meant to receive enough to be a channel for it? Can you go back to that part of you that when you came into this world didn't have a set way of being? And can you dare to once access, can you dare to share it? The very act of writing something down is sharing it. Because if you've been writing with wonder, you followed your intuition, you're allowing love of your own voice to come through. That act of writing in and of itself is daring.
Now this is interesting, because I think that there's a lot of people who might say, I'm not creative. That's for a specific kind of person. That's not me. I don't have that ability inside of me. So what would you say to somebody who maybe doesn't feel like they have any imagination?
I'd say I hear you and I don't believe you. And let me tell you why this isn't true. When we think about a particular outcome, whatever it may be in a relationship, it might be in a job, it might be in a creative writing project, and we think, this particular outcome, this is going to happen. You are using your imagination to think ahead of, this is how it's going to be. You have no idea if that's how it's going to actually be, but you've used your imagination, oftentimes, unfortunately, negatively, to act or think from a place oftentimes of fear, because we think ahead on negative outcomes. Our what ifs are typically, well, what if this particular bad thing happens? Or what if that particular bad thing happens? What if we changed our what ifs to, what if something that I couldn't even imagine possible in terms of good actually plays out? And on another side of it, you have stories that you concoct about why we think the actions of somebody else played out the way they did. But we've used our imagination to create a story that this person acted this way because. So all to say, Alex, we use our imaginations day in and day out, thinking about hypotheticals, acting on those hypotheticals, and that is a highly imaginative act.
What advice would you give to somebody who wants to try to become more imaginative, wants to be more creative, and doesn't quite know how to begin to take that first step to get there?
3-5 minutes max. Free write real quick. What are some things you've always wanted to do but you're too afraid to do? If you don't like that one, fine, sit down. Who are some people that you admire? What did they do? Not why do you admire them, just list what did they do. So whether it's the first list or the second list, take something from that and say, all right, I'm gonna make an action, whatever it may be. But you pick the easiest thing that you're curious about and say, you know what, I'm gonna try this out. No pressure, there's nothing that you have to produce from this other than to teach your brain, I can look for things that bring me joy and take tiny little actions on them. I think a large percentage of the world's population, I'm gonna say world here, they've forgotten how to tap into what is it that I actually want. And yes, I know not everybody's gonna know it because they've never been asked, what do you love? What brings you alive? When you were little, what is it that you wanted to do? Who did you want to become, right? They don't get asked these kinds of questions. A lot of this is mindset, Alex. A lot is mindset.
And I think those are wise words for people who may feel trapped or stuck or who just feel like they aren't able to access the person who they want to be. I do think the beginning of that begins with a glimpse of imagination of, what do I want to be? Where do I want to go? What could I become? But it starts with that kind of just vision of it. And then from there, you can move into it. Well, I just want to thank you for coming. I think what you do in terms of helping people find who they are inside through your wild writing program, I think that's amazing. I hope that it becomes something that more people do because more people need to do what you're offering. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of this and for spreading, your message to people who need to hear it.
Thank you, Alex.